Thank you, and good afternoon. It's good to come home. I'd like to meet that guy you just introduced. He sounds impressive. So I hail from Abbeville, Louisiana, went to Abbeville High School, and then on to UL and finished with a degree in civil engineering. I've told this story many times before to those of you that know me. I kind of fell into the oil and gas industry by accident. When I went to school, my aspiration was to be a civil engineer working on public road and waterworks projects around Lafayette Parish and Vermilion Parish. And so my vision was always I'd have those maps stuck behind the seat of the truck, and I'd drive up to the location and work and then head home in the evening to see the family. And then what happened was when I was in the placement center interviewing for jobs, I found out that the oil and gas industry was paying twice what the civil works companies were doing. So here I am 37 years later, probably representing one of the biggest accidents to ever occur in the oil and gas business, stumbling into it. But I will say, ladies and gentlemen, when I'm finished today, I want you to know that after 37 years in this industry, I have no regrets. I love this industry. I've enjoyed every day of it. I've had the opportunity to travel around the world and to learn many different things, not just oil and gas related, but culturally related, and you should all be very proud of what you do to supply the U.S. and many of you, the world's economies, with affordable, reliable energy. So with that, I have prepared a few remarks that I'd like to go through, but I think it's most appropriate for me to get through what it is that I have on my mind to share with you today and find out what's on your mind. And I know we have a fairly large group in here, but hopefully it won't be so large that it's going to intimidate you and keep you from asking questions. We have ample time for questions, my philosophy always is if I don't have the answer, I'll lie to you because you won't know any different. Okay, so with that as a starter, so we're all keenly aware, I'm not going to tell you anything you don't know, that these are challenging times for our industry. Indeed, it's one of the most challenging cycles in recent history. Now, I will say that, I hear people walking around the office where I work in Frank's International that say, well, this is different this time, and I want to choke them. Because in many ways, it's not different. This is a cyclical industry. We all know it. But there are some unique aspects to this cycle that we're in that are a bit unique. And I think it's not so much about the correction, but it's the fact that we have seen such a rapid decline in commodity prices, and more shocking is the response that we have seen from the operator community and the profound reductions that they have made in their capital programs. And for those that are in the service sector, we live and die by the investments of our clients. And so it's been a very, very acute occurrence. I don't think anyone at the last LAGCOE 2 years ago would have ever envisioned we'd be where we are today. This is not the first time we've been through the cycle. It's likely for at least someone that's been in this business for 37 years, probably not going to be our last one either. In my 35 years with Chevron before I retired in 2013, I had gone through 5 personally. So, it's something we go through in our business. We learn from each and every time. I'm not going to stand here today and tell you that we're coming to the end. I wish I could. I don't even know that we're at a market bottom yet. If I could predict this industry, I think I would be selling books and appearing on TV and making a lot more money than I'm making today. I can't predict energy prices, but what I can state with absolute confidence is that the world will continue to need oil and gas for the foreseeable future. And I think you might have heard some of this yesterday for those of you that made yesterday's keynote address. Even if you take the most optimistic assumptions around growth in renewable and alternatives, you're still looking at scenarios out to 2050 where oil and gas will supply the majority of the energy needed by a growing global economy. In other words, ladies and gentlemen, it's my view we're going to need every molecule we can get our hands on, including renewables and alternatives. It's not an if situation, and this is in my last few years in Chevron when I had the opportunity to spend a lot of time in Washington trying to educate our regulators and our legislators. It was, don't look at it as it's oil and gas or it's renewables or alternatives. You have to start thinking about it in terms of and. Because as global economies grow, as developing nations grow, energy demand is going to grow, and we're going to need, as I mentioned, every molecule we can get our hands on this. So I mentioned I've been through 5 of these cycles. Cyclicality is something we've got to live with each and every day, but I don't think it's necessarily bad. And I had a great conversation in the back of the room today, just as I got to the room, around what is good about where we find ourselves in today. So let me expound a little bit on this. Starting with the upside of the curve. Obviously, when industry is expanding into new frontiers, that drives technology development, requirements for new technology, and in turn, new technology application. When times are good, companies grow. When they grow, it creates great expansion opportunities in the employment field. We hit the universities hard. Engineering and geological students love it because they have multiple offers. Within the companies themselves, for experienced hires, it also promotes opportunities for promotion and advancement. Eventually, however, we know how it works, right? So with expansion comes an escalation of costs, creates stress in the supply chain, and causes affordable things to be a little less affordable and economic. I'll give you an example. So again, I'm 37 years in this industry, so I've been around for a while, but not too long ago, when I was in Chevron's North America unit, when we found a 100 million barrel deep water discovery in the Gulf of Mexico, it was a big deal. I mean, that supported a full field development. And so where we find ourselves today is a 100 million barrel discovery is a marginal tieback if there is infrastructure in the vicinity to tie it back to. So clearly we have seen a tremendous growth in costs that have come from the expansion of capital investment and the expansion of activity in the business. So eventually, as things get more expensive, we have a supply-demand situation, and finally supply, because of all that investment, swamps demand. And then we go in the down cycle, right? As the market softens, commodity prices fall, activity diminishes, contraction eventually occurs, and companies that have not prepared for that contraction get into some pretty stressful situations. Debt holders, creditors start looking for repayment of debt. It causes financial restructuring, or worse yet, even some bankruptcies. And in some cases, they're forced to sell. And I think you'd probably say that sounds pretty familiar with what we're reading and hearing about and going through in our companies today. Also, what happens is, as a result of the contraction, there's workforce reductions, mergers, acquisitions, bankruptcies, very challenging times, right? So what's positive about all of that? Well, you have to look a little deeper to find the positive side, and in my view, here's where it is. With challenge comes opportunity. Lower investment and resulting contraction eventually drives costs down in the supply chain. Some of that through rate reductions, some of it through innovation, and overall towards lower cost of ownership. Depressed commodity prices and reduced activity levels drive our industry to get a little more introspective, meaning we look internally for improvements and efficiencies, as well as standardization. When we're operating at our peak activity levels, our main focus is on securing the next rig, the next crew, or managing the next project. However, when contraction creates the space to become a little introspective, good things can happen. And I think you heard earlier that I have the great privilege of leading Frank's International. I served on their board of directors for a year just after retirement, and then had the great fortune to have the confidence of Mr. Donald Mosing, who's here with us today, his son Keith Mosing, to get involved in a company that for 35 years as a customer of Frank's, I came to appreciate their great brand, in that they were kind of Chevron's complex well solution provider. What I wasn't as appreciative of was, as you get into the organization itself, the commitment that you find to serve their customer with excellence and to go bend over backwards to do what it takes to serve their customer. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Frank's, and I apologize if this sounds a little bit like an infomercial, but for the last 9 months, I have been immersed in trying to work with the leadership team to position this company not only to survive in today's market, but to use this opportunity to reposition us to be a more formidable competitor and a better supplier of goods and services to our customers. We've had a massive internal review. We've looked at our cost structure, how to better align the cost of delivering our services with the current activity levels. We found opportunities through vendor savings, through inventory management and equipment, revising front and back office processes, and yes, right-sizing our organization. More on this a little bit later, but eventually, obviously, the cycle will repeat itself. There's no way around it. The short-term outlook for our industry is difficult. At Frank's, because of all the uncertainty, we're focused on controlling what we can. Despite all of the uncertainty, we are committed to continuing to deliver outstanding service to our customers while continuing to investigate new ways to maintain our technological advantage and sustain our reputation as the complex well solution provider. So let me talk a little bit about some of the things we're doing that we think will positively impact our company longer term, and things that I might suggest to you that we think about as an industry. As I mentioned a few moments ago, the world will continue to need oil and gas for generations to come. Our industry is rapidly evolving, and it's becoming more and more complex, both technologically and operationally. Indeed, our industry is setting its sights on deeper and more complex wells, allowing us to access supplies that not too long ago were considered inaccessible. Hydraulic fracking and the ever-evolving technology that comes with it is allowing us to produce out of zones that heretofore were considered too tight to produce. I can remember a time in my career, seems not like that long ago, when shales were considered a drilling hazard. We hated to drill through them. There were always shows in hydrocarbon, but it always created real problems for the integrity of the wellbore. And now look at shales today and the important role that they're playing in our national energy security. At Frank's, we also believe that automation will continue to play a more prominent role in our industry, not from a replacement of personnel standpoint, but improving safety, reliability, and our cost performance. We understand this trend, and we want to be a significant player in this exciting future. As an example, we're not only planning and designing for the next generation of wells, but we're also exploring technologies that will allow us to intersect the rig of the future. Being a successful company in today's marketplace, it requires possessing a sense of urgency around immediate performance improvement, but also the wisdom to balance short-term actions against creating a compelling and sustainable future. Almost anyone can lead an organization when oil prices are $100 a barrel or higher. As Peter Drucker famously quipped, management is doing things right, leadership is doing the right thing. Leaders must be able to make decisions that may not feel comfortable or easy, but they are the right thing to do for the entire organization. For example, advising employees that they will have to do without something or they will no longer have a job is one of the more difficult things leaders face. I have been through this throughout my career, both at Chevron and unfortunately now at Frank's. However, working through these difficult situations and facing them head on ultimately makes the company stronger and more resilient in the future. Let me highlight a number of steps that I have taken in my new role in Frank's, which are aimed not only at surviving during this challenging market, but also prospering. First, I surrounded myself with a winning team of smart, competent, and capable leaders who are passionate about performance and compassionate in their approach to delivering that performance. Secondly, my leadership team and I defined the company's mission, vision, and values, and we are working to embed it within the fabric of the global organization. Until recently, I would argue that while Frank certainly had a mission and a vision for growth and success, along with core values that always put our customer first, all of which were sewn into the fabric of the company we were and we are, that we never truly drove it throughout our global operations. As Jack Welch said, good business leaders create a vision, articulate the vision, passionately own the vision, and relentlessly drive it to completion. And I couldn't agree more, ladies and gentlemen. At Frank's, we're also building a new brand and a communication strategy that will allow us to articulate our vision to our employees and to our customers, as well as drive a common approach to the interaction with our customers and our stakeholders globally. We refer to it as One Frank's. Next, our leadership team defined both the short-term and long-term strategic goals of the company, where we are today and where do we want to be 10 years and beyond. Once we determined our strategic goals, we identified the actions necessary to deliver them. For example, what is the ideal organization that will allow us to competitively serve our customers with the level of service they have come to expect from us, but be ready to ramp up once prices rebound, not just from a size perspective, but also from a process perspective. The new structure should enable efficient and effective workflows across all of our service and product lines, resulting in lower overall cost to our customers. And I want to draw a contrast between downsizing and right-sizing. As I noted earlier, the oil and gas industry is cyclical, and commodity prices and activity levels will eventually recover. Unfortunately, our industry has not learned from history. When the market is depressed, companies drastically downsize in order to meet the current conditions without thinking about the eventual recovery. College recruitment is reduced, and worse yet, completely abandoned. Call it the survival mentality. When the market eventually rebounds, companies are unprepared for the ramp up, which results in increased costs to hire or rehire additional untrained and inexperienced staff. This is overreacting to the current environment, something our industry unfortunately is known for. Conversely, reducing your cost base and adjusting the workforce while working to position the company for the eventual recovery is what I'd like to refer to as right-sizing. At Frank's, this includes a continual pursuit of cost reduction initiatives, including a modest reduction in our workforce, as well as cost reductions through process improvements and internal efficiencies. This has and will continue to help mitigate the adverse market conditions in the short term while ensuring that as a company we are well positioned operationally for the long term and the eventual recovery. At Frank's, we're focusing the bulk of our attention on a wide array of process improvements, and to date, the results have been significant. Let me share just a few examples. For decades as a private enterprise, our inventory processes were designed to account for situations that may arise. In other words, working to ensure we were prepared for a customer request or need that may develop during a project. I like to refer to that as a just-in-case inventory approach. Today, we are working to restructure our inventory and manufacturing processes to focus on a just-in-time approach, the ability to react quickly, efficiently, and of course safely when a customer needs a particular product or service. This allows us to continue to focus on the future without sacrificing the strength of our balance sheet or wasting valuable resources. Our year-to-date results indicate approximately $30 million in inventory reduction and additional opportunities still in front of us. Secondly, a leaner workforce means that we need leaner processes and procedures. Our leadership team has embraced lean manufacturing concepts, and we're in the process of applying them throughout our organization. From accounting to engineering, our workforce is enthusiastically learning and embracing the principles of lean business methodology. For instance, in just one lean workshop conducted here in Lafayette, Louisiana, our team identified over $8 million in potential savings. Just imagine spreading that over 60 countries globally where Frank's operates. We are also creating a new and more focused marketing and sales organization that more effectively combines relationship management with technical capability. If we're going to create the technology for the rig of the future, we need to fully understand what those technology demands that will exist, how to meet those demands, and then how to properly market and sell our technical capabilities to meet that demand. All of these efforts and others too numerous to elaborate upon are key to taking advantage of a down market and positioning our company to be on a strong footing for success during and following a challenging commodities market. So let me conclude by saying, as someone that has worked in and followed this industry for most of my life, I am confident that supply and the demand imbalance will eventually correct, causing commodity prices to recover and activity levels to rebound. There's much we can do, both as individual companies and collectively as an industry, to ensure that we not only survive this difficult market condition, but position ourselves to prosper. What we can ill afford to do is to waste another down cycle hoping for better times ahead without embracing change. Let's learn from our history and experience and find the right balance between taking action to lower cost while building a foundation for a successful and sustainable future. Thank you for welcoming me here today, giving me an opportunity to come back home. It has truly been an honor to address you, and as time allows, I'd like to open the floor up to questions and hopefully some good answers. Thank you.
Gary, Bill Flores, thank you so much for your talk, good information. Your comment about the rig of the future, do you have any thoughts on what that may look like and what Frank's doing to prepare for that?
Well, so Bill, talking with our customers and with some of the drilling contractors, they are starting to envision what that's going to look like. There are a lot of different concepts out there. Clearly, more automation is going to be involved, which really represents a threat for our service provider like Frank's. Right. And so we have to understand what that automation is going to look like, what impact it's going to have on our core products and services, and then be a player in helping that transformation and making sure that on the backside that we are still the service provider of choice. For instance, if casing and tubular running equipment becomes an integral part of the rig and it's a fully automated scheme, then we'd like to, because of our expertise, we'd like to be a player in designing that automation and programming that automation and being the company that is out there to support the rig contractor as they run it, as an example. But you know, the time cycle involved in this transformation from where we are now with 6th and 7th generation deepwater drill ships to whatever that rig of the future looks like, I think is still a ways off. But if you're going to intersect it, you got to start now.
I had a question, Gary. Greg Stuslis, completion specialist. I know being with Chevron for a number of years, I've been with an operator twice and with service companies 3 times and currently with a service company. But as far as, so I've seen both sides of the fence, understand both sides of the fence. So I know a lot of times as an operator, they're driven to have their vendors have competitive pricing. As you switch sides, have you changed views on how vendors should be conceived?
I sure have. You know, every time I run into one of my former colleagues in Chevron, they always ask me, well, Gary, how is it on the other side? And I always tell them, I say, you know, it's a lot easier serving humble pie than it is eating it all the time. No, yeah, you know, there's a big disappointment. So when I was on the other side, I tried to embed a philosophy in my organization that there were certain suppliers that were strategic in the role that they played in the well construction process or the project management process. And those strategic suppliers, that we should move from a pure price dynamic to one of a value of ownership. And, you know, and I must say, I've been disheartened, a little discouraged at how vicious things have become in the supply chain, where total cost of ownership or total value of ownership has kind of been pushed to the side, and instead you're dealing with supply chain organizations and it's all around price. And it doesn't matter what I get for that price, it's just price. And then the driller or the operations guy then has to sort through that mess and figure out how to construct his wellbore in a safe and reliable fashion. So it has been, it's been eye-opening for me, and I am getting full of humble pie.
So given you've been through 5 of these before, you said, has the response of operators to a service provider like yourself been different this time around than the past 5? Or have you found that they've always relegated themselves to trying to find the best ways to just get the price down and not look at the overall value of whatever product you're providing?
Well, I think we'd have to ask our suppliers that have been suppliers through previous cycles. This is my first cycle as a supplier. I know I have gone back to my former employer, and I have seen a behavioral change in them relative to previous down cycles. Now, whether that is a good proxy for what's going on across the board, I don't know, but I just sense that because of the fast fall in prices and the fact that some of the costs in their system are sticky and they don't come down as quickly as commodity prices, that it's caused real stress on cash flow. And that stress on cash flow is now driving a more short-term and irrational behavior. So my perspective, it's a little different, a little harsher discussion now than it has been in the past, but I'm novice at this because this is my first cycle on the supply side. And I hope my last, but.
Okay.
Yep.
Warren Keller with Purvis Industries. With regard to right-sizing the company, there obviously have been, you've had some employees that have been there for a long time that are no longer with the company. I was wondering how you deal with the psychological aspect of those that are left who watch their friends go.
Yeah, and that's the difficult part because, when you work side by side with someone on a shop floor, on a crew for years and years, they become family. And when you have to part company because of the downturn in industry, it is like losing family. Depending on their situation, if they're in a good situation where they've saved for retirement and they have a lot of years of service, they may be fine with a severance offering to call it a day. And then there are others that really want to work and need to work, and so you work hard to keep tabs on them. And when the recovery comes, if they still want to be part of the team, then you want to bring them back very quickly. But this is 5 cycles for me. It hadn't gotten any easier. If anything, it's more difficult. And you just have to deal with people in a compassionate way. You have to understand these are life-changing events, not just for the ones that are leaving, you're correct, but for those that stay behind. And you have to give the organization time to heal. Thank you. Yes, sir.
What do you propose to tell, especially the kids that are here at UL, that had a pretty nice graduating class, that had probably the lowest opportunities for employment that they've seen ever? I know from a personal standpoint, we got a relative that has gone back to grad school simply because 6 months ago, he had an interview, and now it's gone.
Right.
We've seen this time and time again where we stop the recruitment process.
Right.
We're not hiring people, and we leave another gap in our system.
Yeah.
What is Franks going to do from your standpoint?
Well, let me answer that question more broadly from industry. First of all, I think we have to quit this swinging the pendulum so far where it's all stop or it's everyone that has a pulse, right? And we have to find some more ratable way to partner with our universities and to bring in new talent, because regardless of the cycles, we are going to need new talent in this industry to meet this ever and growing demand for energy for decades to come. That's a given. Every supposed expert that looks at supply demand and looks at the energy equation, including all forms of energy, are going to tell the oil and gas industry, you better keep going at it pretty hard for several decades. And so that means we're going to need an influx of new talent. So this is one of the frustrations that I have, being a 37-year veteran in industry, is that we allow this pendulum to swing to the point where it's very confusing and disruptive to the universities and their students. So that, that aside, what I would tell university students is, and I'll just use myself as an example, I've been through 5 of these. So it is a cyclical industry, but each cycle, the industry uses that down cycle as a way to get healthier, more productive, and in the up cycles it drives growth and technology and opportunities globally. And so there's good with both sides of it, but you have to understand it's a cyclical industry. But if you take that and you kind of understand there's these ups and downs, and we feel really bad when we're in the downs and feel really good when we're in the ups, the net effect of those cycles is the trajectory's pointing up. Employment is going to grow over time as we experience the crew change that's going to happen with many of us that have been in industry as long as I have, and there's just great opportunities. I've had opportunities to live and work around the world, and when I was growing up in Abbeville, Louisiana, my aspiration was to get out of USL and to go to work right near the house and become, kind of a homebody. And popped out 35 years later, having seen the world, learning a lot of things, not just about our industry, but about cultures. And, my children grew up in it and understand it, and they came back appreciative of the quality of life that us in the U.S. oftentimes take for granted. So they're good things. It's just understand, young people that are in the university, that timing may not work out depending upon that cycle, and pursuing advanced degrees or doing something useful. I had a son that went to school to become a pilot, and when he got out of the university as a certified pilot, there was literally nothing. He ran a video store in Norman, Oklahoma for 2 years. That is what got him a job in the energy business. It wasn't the aviation degree and what he aspired to become. It's the business experience that he had that worked him into a supply chain organization in one of our major customers. So, just continue to stay at it, and the cycle will come back and opportunities will be there. It's a bit of a long-winded answer, but I'm a little passionate about that. Yes, sir.
You spoke about how Frank's was taking the opportunity at this time with the downturn to be able to review the mission statement, the vision, mission statement, and the values of the company, and taking steps to be able to drive those values down throughout the company.
Right.
I think you mentioned that the lean process that y'all used in several areas, and money it saved was maybe an example of
Right.
how to do that. Are there any other examples that you could cite for us that would be great for companies to do at this time to get their values down throughout their organization?
Well, when you consider the history of our company, the company had its origins in the Gulf of Mexico and in Louisiana, and eventually a second company was formed, an international company that grew phenomenal growth in international. It wasn't until recent years that we started trying to put our international operations together with our domestic operations. And as soon as we started bolting that together, we started recognizing that there was tremendous leverage by taking best practices and opportunities from one part of the world that had been tackled and conquered and leverage that across the enterprise. But we really didn't have the leadership structure to support that. So we had to put a sustaining structure in place to get leaders globally to understand this concept of one Franks. And before you embark on a solution to a problem that you might have or a challenge that a customer might have, the first thing you do is leverage the network to see if that opportunity has been tackled somewhere else. And it not only saves the money and the effort to develop the solution that's already been developed, but it exponentially increases the cycle time to deliver that solution to the customer. I know this sounds very, very basic, but it's easier said than done. And so when we think about breakthroughs in our inventory processes, we've got inventory around the world. Frank's operates on 6 continents and 60 countries. And we have inventory all over the world. So if we can take this breakthrough that is occurring in Lafayette, Louisiana, and take those same processes and lessons learned and apply that across the world, it's a huge win for us. And these are the types of things that we're doing. So we had a vision. We had this relentless pursuit of satisfying the customer to any and all extent possible, those are good things. And what we're trying to do is to keep those and move ourselves from good to great.
So, I'm out from Global Speed Translation. I want listening to some situations, layoffs, and talk about the Mexican industry reform. How do you see Frank as building towards opportunities in Mexico?
So, with Mexican energy reform, how would we see Frank's as a player in Mexico? I would say that in all of the hydrocarbon basins around the world, we either have operations or we contemplate having operations. And our, approach is as soon as we have a fiscal regime and a regulatory regime that is predictable, that we know we can operate in, that we can return value to our shareholders and to our company, start developing a national workforce and do it safely and reliably, we're all in. I think in the case of Mexico, we're very optimistic that as they expand more and more of their exploration and development activities involving international oil companies and integrated oil companies, that there's going to be a growing market there. And the good news for the Mexicans is the regulatory regime is rather mature, and what they're trying to fix now is what are the new fiscal terms so that as we bring new partners in, that it competes with other global opportunities. And these are one of the challenges that these countries that are moving from nationalistic programs to more open programs have to realize is, just opening up your borders to resource development, it's a great first step, but unless it's competitive globally, money from our customers flows to where it's either safer or more profitable, and that's what I think we're seeing Mexico right now kind of work out. What is going to be this framework for this new deal that's going to be competitive with other opportunities around the globe? Because we're so big in the Gulf of Mexico, this is where we grew up. We're pretty excited about the growth prospects, especially offshore Mexico, and as they get into some of the lower tertiary trend opportunities, these are the most complex wells in the world, and that's kind of where we like to shine. So we're very optimistic. Thank you for the question. We had another, yes, sir.
Yeah, so based on your experience going through some of these cycles, do you see M&A or industry consolidation happening? If so, how does a company like Frank's deal with that? Disruptive, positive, negative?
So it could be all of those things. It could be positive, it could be negative, it could be disruptive. I will say that my experience would suggest that we're not nearly through consolidation in the industry because I mentioned earlier these lower commodity prices and the profound withdrawal of capital in the marketplace has really put a lot of stress on the service sector, and a lot of these companies were borrowing and building high levels of debt, betting on $100 plus energy prices and a lot of investment. And when that kind of rolls over, it does introduce a lot of stress. That stress is going to drive sales. It's going to drive, unfortunately, bankruptcies. And we're going to see more of that the longer the trough persists on prices. In Frank's, we're in a good spot in that because of the philosophy of our founding father, Frank Mosing, Donald's father, he always ran the company on essentially a checkbook basis. If money's in the bank, then we can spend. If money's not in the bank, we can't spend. And as a result, as a company, we find ourselves with a very nice cash position right now and essentially no debt. So that puts us in a bit of a contrarian position, a very good spot for acquisitions. And so we are continuing to look for things that might really help us as a company achieve our vision. We'd love to see our top line revenues grow over the next 10 years substantially. Whether we do that through the business we're in now or whether we broaden and diversify our offering to maybe not be as cyclical. Right now, we live and die with well count, are things that we're looking at, including technology to help us maybe jumpstart this leap to the rig of the future. So we're in the hunt. We're looking. We're one of the few fortunate ones that can afford to look, and it's a good place to be in.
Pricing, you said. My name is George Stay with Epic Industries. And I learned once you drop pricing, they all come into negotiated master agreement. When the market picks up, how are you going to bring the pricing?
Yeah, so again, some of you have been at this for a long time, right? So, you know, I am a firm believer, having been on the other side for 35 of my 37 years, to say that oil company executives and the people who make decisions can be rational, right? And so I think there is a point where there's less stress on the balance sheet, where more and more of the decision-making moves from the bean counters and over towards the drillers and the operations guys. And when that pendulum swings back over to where people that own the delivery of that well or whatever the case might be are making the decisions, that the door is now open to have a discussion around total cost of ownership and value creation. It's obviously not right now, but I do believe, and I'm optimistic, that our company is making sacrifices today with our clients with an expectation, and we voiced that expectation to them, that when things turn around, regardless of the terms and conditions in those contracts, we're going to be in there talking about abilities to bring our technology in and with it bring rates back to areas that are acceptable, levels that are acceptable to our shareholders and to ourselves. You just have to be optimistic, and I know right now it's very difficult to be optimistic because it's like every month, you know, you're getting a new haircut every time you go to see your customers, even when you don't have any hair left. So, but it's a tough situation.
All your years of downturns, how long do you think this is going to last?
I think I said earlier, if I could predict that, I'd be on television right now and signing and selling books. So I don't know, but I will say, you know, I do a lot of reading. I read our competitors as well as some of our major integrated oilfield service companies, quarterly reports, monthly reports, annual reports, and we also tie into IHS and some of the other firms. And I would say that, you know, if you wanted to be a little on the optimistic side, you'd see price recovery in the second half of 16, but not a lot of capital brought in because of the way our customers build their budgets with their boards, and the fact that even with price recovery in the second half of 16, I don't think they'll have the confidence sufficient to bring capital back in. They'll still be trying to hoard cash to build that cash coffer back up. So I'm thinking, you know, if you ask me what I thought, some price improvement in the second half of the year in terms of commodities, but not a lot of capital change until 2017. I don't know on the compendium of being totally pessimistic to total optimistic where that sits, but based on my reading, I would say that's somewhere in the middle. I mean, there was a Goldman article that came out here a while back that said before we get through the end of the first quarter of next year, oil prices will hit $20 a barrel. That's the pessimistic side.
But Barclays report yesterday is completely different.
Okay. So Barclays essentially said what I just said, right? So a slight price recovery second half of 16, but don't expect capital flow back in until 2017, right? So they're kind of a midstreamer. Yes.
Lynn Duplantis, OneSubsea, Aaron Slumpy Company, as a former operator, what do operators today do to drive their own efficiencies, improve their costs, and adjust to today's market prices? second question, will they be more apt to accept pre-engineered solutions, these standard quality plans?
So firstly, they're doing, in the short term, they're doing a lot of what we're doing. They're right-sizing their workforce, they're looking for cost savings, they're restructuring their organizations and consolidating back office processes from a more fragmented, distributed model to more central models. So I think they're doing a lot to squeeze their overhead, right? I think the next step for them is going to be, okay, they've pretty much squeezed the price reduction balloon about as far as they can go. And I think they're going to start sensing there's not a lot of value that's going to come out of continuing to squeeze something that's just about lifeless. So I'm hopeful that what they're going to do is start to engage industry in driving standards, because that is the next big step change in the cost of development and the cost of delivering services. And I know, Cameron being a player in the OneSubsea joint venture, you guys see it each and every day. If you could standardize on a subsea approach, either a wellhead, manifold, pipeline manifold, whatever, if you could standardize and offer to industry a standard, you'd probably improve your cycle time 12 to 18 months and probably lower the cost of that kit 20 to 25% to your customers. That's low-hanging fruit in my view. And yet the operators haven't come together yet to say enough's enough, and we have to quit engineering ourselves out of an economic development. And I think it's going to have to become a little worse, and the first and the easy one to play is the price play, but that's now played out. So I'm hopeful that they're going to come to industry and say, okay, now that we've got to a point where essentially we can't go anywhere else, the next big bang is standardization. So get us there. Help get us there. Now this is something for those of you that listen to any of the earnings calls from Schlumberger and Halliburton. Both of their executives have been advocating this for the last 3 or 4 months. It's time, customers, to quit competing with engineering and to start working together to come to a more cost-effective and efficient solution. If things stay where they are, like we just talked about, till mid to late 2016 in terms of commodity prices, I'm optimistic that's going to happen.
When we see the turn in commodity prices, concerning your comments about capital, do you see that capital coming out of surplus cash flows, or do you see that capital coming from the sidelines? Or to get back in the game?
It depends, David, on the size of the company. So I think the smaller the company, the more they're going to view venture capital as a good source, a ready source of capital. The challenge is going to be what you get with that help, financial help, is a lot of control help. So, but I think some companies are going to look favorably upon that. I think the bigger companies, it's going to be out of free cash flow. They're going to get to a point where they're confident they can cover their dividends and they can cover the majority of their capital program, and then they'll start stepping it back up.
Follow-up, considering the severity of this downturn, you see the investment class seeing coming back in as a big risk, getting these rigs back to work again, putting money in the bank.
See the investor class as a risk?
These guys outside capital.
Right, right.
To help these smaller operators.
I think it's a lot of capital looking for a place to go right now, and I think in a way it could be a very positive development for the service sector in the short term. All I'm suggesting is that longer term it represents challenges in the boardroom and in governance. But when you're looking at, survival, do I die or do I accept? The thing we all got to be cognizant of, although different investor classes are looking for different things, but typically what they're looking for is a 3 to 5 year horizon and then a flip. So it creates a bit of turmoil and turnover in the industry, but the lesser of the evils. may be to get them in here and let's get these rigs back to work. But they will only accept certain returns, right? They're pretty savvy investors, and they're not in it to provide affordable, energy supplies to U.S. households. They're in it to make money. So you got to figure out a way to make money. That means oil prices have to go up or costs need to continue to go down. We're getting pretty close to our contract. One last question?
I can make a closing comment,
Okay,
Gary.
if you would.
That was an excellent presentation, very relevant for our industry. I do want to make a comment. Thank Donald Mosing for gracing us with his presence here today for an appropriate meeting. It can't be more fitting for your cell phone to go off twice during Gary's meeting. You're still needed and wanted, so thank you for being around.
Gary, on behalf of LAGCOE, we greatly appreciate you being here today with us. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all very much for attending.